Usually when we talk about like getting a medical diagnosis,
Mm.
there's this expectation of real clinical precision.
Oh, absolutely.
Like you break your arm,
Right.
you go in, the x-ray shows that jagged white line.
Hmm.
The doctor physically points to it, puts a cast on it, and says, okay, here is your timeline for healing.
Right. It's very measurable.
Exactly. It's this completely visible, objective problem with a highly structured, objective solution. And we crave that.
We really do. We crave that level of clarity in almost every aspect of our lives. I mean, we want a blueprint, right? A diagnostic manual.
Yeah.
We want a clear set of physics to explain why things fall apart and, more importantly, how to put them back together.
We do. But then, you step into the world of human relationships.
Oh, boy.
Right. Specifically, the whole lead up to marriage and then the actual day-to-day reality of sustaining one. And suddenly, that x-ray machine is, it's just utterly useless.
Absolutely useless.
We are looking at a landscape that is, frankly, it's chaotic. People want this blueprint for how to find a partner and build a life. But instead, society essentially hands us a bucket of wet dirt and says, here, try to build a skyscraper out of this. Good luck.
I love that you brought up the dirt because that metaphor of wet dirt is remarkably close to the actual linguistics of our source material for today's deep dive.
Is it really?
It is, yeah. We're exploring this framework that identifies the root cause of all this modern relationship anxiety. And the text presents a really profound conceptual pairing. It contrasts two completely different approaches to human connection.
Okay.
They're called Deen and Teen.
Deen and teen. Okay, let's unpack those terms for the listener.
Yeah.
Because this is the lens through which we're going to view the entire lifespan of a relationship today. So Deen broadly translates to the religious path or like the ideal divine blueprint.
Yes, the structured path.
Exactly. In the context of this material, it represents a system that is structured, it's radically transparent, highly practical, and specifically designed to make human life and partnerships harmonious. Think of it as the manufacturer's manual for human beings.
I think that's the perfect way to phrase it. It's the manual that understands our psychology, our flaws, our baseline needs, and standing in direct opposition to that clarity is Teen.
Right, which literally translates to mud.
Mud, yeah, or clay.
Mud or clay. And the source uses teen mud as this brilliant catch-all metaphor for the messy, ego-driven, convoluted cultural habits we've just layered over relationships over the centuries.
Oh, the layers are so thick now.
They really are. It represents artificial societal pressure, the desperate need to keep up with the neighbors, the toxic gamified dating culture we see today, the performative weddings that put people in massive debt.
All the stuff that bogs us down.
All of that is the mud. It's like owning an incredibly complex, expensive machine. The Deen is the actual user manual telling you exactly what grade of oil to put in it, how to maintain the engine. But instead of opening the manual,
You just throw it in a drawer.
you throw it in a drawer. You decide, I'm going to fix this engine using duct tape, some random advice I found on a Reddit forum at 2 a.m., and sheer willpower.
Which is operating deep in the Teen.
Exactly, operating in the mud. And then, when the engine literally explodes on the highway, we sit by the side of the road and blame the machine. We say, oh, well, marriage is just a broken institution.
Right, or people aren't meant to be together.
Right.
We blame the institution to avoid taking responsibility for our own terrible methods. And the source material makes a deeply logical, almost clinical argument against that fatalism.
Yeah.
It strips away all the accumulated cultural mud to reveal these ancient principles, the Deen, not as like archaic constraints, but as incredibly modern, hyper-functional solutions to the exact relationship problems we face right now.
And that is our mission today. We are going to wash off the mud. We're going to walk through this blueprint chronologically for you. So before we even think about wedding invitations, right? Before we talk about engagements or even meeting someone, we have to look at the starting line.
The very foundation.
Because the blueprint demands, we ask a really foundational question. When is a human being actually ready to take on another human being?
Because if you start building on a compromised foundation, I mean, no amount of architectural brilliance later on will save the house from collapsing.
So true. And the text illustrates this with a scenario that I think is universally recognizable. Imagine a 15-year-old kid.
Okay.
He's in a mixed school environment, his hormones are firing, and he gets completely distracted by a classmate. He catches feelings.
That's 15-year-olds do.
Right. And he wants to get her number. Now, he's not trying to propose marriage, obviously. He just wants to text about homework or ask if she watched the latest episode of a show. The source specifically mentions Spacetoon, actually.
Oh, Spacetoon, right.
Yeah, which is an Arabic animation channel, so it's the equivalent of texting all night about a new anime or a series on Netflix.
It's a classic, seemingly harmless teenage crush,
Mm.
and Society the Mud often romanticizes this, doesn't it?
Oh, constantly.
We write coming-of-age movies about it. We view it as practice for real life.
Well, I would assume it is practice. I mean, isn't there an argument that young people need to kind of stumble through these awkward, low-stakes romantic interactions to learn how to communicate?
You'd think so, but the blueprint argues the exact opposite. It focuses heavily on cognitive load and opportunity cost. The stance here is rooted in the necessity of building the self first.
Building the self first.
Right. Those adolescent and early adult years represent the most critical, irreplaceable developmental window of a person's entire life. It is the time dedicated to establishing what the text calls the fundamentals of life.
So like education, emotional regulation.
Exactly. Figuring out your career trajectory, understanding your own mind. The argument is that if you allow yourself to get sidetracked by the emotional roller coaster of early romance,
The texting anxiety.
oh, the constant texting anxiety, the drama of teenage social dynamics, the preoccupation with another person's perception of you, if you get sucked into that, you are inherently diverting a massive amount of mental and emotional energy away from your own foundation.
Wow, that makes sense.
The source warns that indulging in these premature distractions often leads to a harsh awakening later in life. You look around in your mid-20s and realize, oh, wait, I've fallen significantly behind my peers.
The peers who treated that phase of life seriously and focused on their own development.
Precisely.
You essentially spent your prime construction years playing in the mud. You're trying to pick out the curtains for a shared house when you haven't even poured the concrete for your own identity.
Such a good way to put it.
But let me push back a little on how we measure that readiness. Because if the advice is, wait until you're ready, society usually translates that into a number.
Always a number.
People say, oh, don't settle down until you're at least 25 or wait until you're 30 and have a certain salary. Does the blueprint give us an age requirement?
No, it explicitly rejects the idea of a chronological magic number. The source is emphatic on this distinction. Age and maturity are not synonymous.
Right.
It is entirely possible to have a 35-year-old who operates with the emotional volatility of a teenager.
We all know a few of those.
Right. And conversely, a 19-year-old who possesses profound emotional and practical stability.
So if a young man, say 19 or 20, has actually done the work, he's mature, he understands responsibility, and he comes to his parents genuinely seeking a lawful, committed marriage, what's the protocol?
The directive is to facilitate it without delay.
Wow, really?
Yes. If he is ready to take on the profound responsibility of the dean, you do not arbitrarily hold him back simply because cultural norms dictate he should spend his 20s, playing the field.
Just to meet an arbitrary timeline.
Exactly. Denying a mature person the structure of marriage pushes them toward the mud.
That is a massive paradigm shift. But it brings us to the dark mirror of that situation, which the source spends a lot of time warning against. What happens when the chronological age is there? Maybe the guy is 28, but the maturity is completely absent.
We arrive at one of the most destructive societal habits imaginable, the concept of marriage as a cure.
This part of the text was chilling, honestly, because it is so incredibly common.
It really is.
You have parents looking at their son. He's irresponsible. Maybe he's reckless with money. He can't hold down a job. Or worse, he has severe anger issues. And the parents, instead of holding him accountable, come up with this brilliant, muddy solution. Let's find him a wife.
They view marriage as a reform school. There is this deeply ingrained magical thinking that the sheer weight of a wedding ring will spontaneously synthesize maturity out of thin air.
Right. They convince themselves, oh, a good woman will calm him down.
Yes. Or, once he has a family, he'll naturally become wise.
Which is insane. They're entirely outsourcing their parenting failures onto a stranger. They're essentially hiring an unpaid therapist and calling her a bride.
The source attacks this practice with absolute ferocity, highlighting the profound injustice it inflicts. It is a betrayal of the other family, and specifically a betrayal of the young woman.
Yeah.
She enters a covenant expecting a partner, and instead she is handed a rehabilitation project.
And the text points out the tragic, highly predictable outcome. It's not a fairy tale where his heart grows 3 sizes. A week or 10 days after the wedding, there is explosive conflict.
Sometimes there is violence.
Yeah. And inevitably, it ends in a messy, traumatic breakup. because the individual was fundamentally unequipped for partnership.
Hmm.
The text gives a very stern, unforgettable warning here. Do not trap other people's daughters in your son's unresolved issues.
It places the burden of readiness squarely on the individual and their family. A marriage license is not a prescription for emotional instability.
No, it's not. And that forces such a high level of personal accountability.
Yeah.
You cannot enter this institution to appease your parents, or because your mom picked someone out and you feel too socially embarrassed to say no.
Right.
If you are just going along with it to avoid causing a fuss, you are already operating deep in the mud. The decision has to be yours, based on a brutally honest internal audit of your own readiness.
And moving forward with that level of internal honesty completely redefines how the actual search for a partner is conducted. The methods have to match the maturity.
Let's follow that thread into the next phase then. You've done the audit. You are genuinely mature. You have your foundation.
Yeah.
Now, how do you actually find someone without getting sucked into the swamp of modern dating?
It's quite a swamp.
Because the cultural mud right now is thicker than ever. We have endless talking stages where no one knows where they stand. We have secretive late-night texts. We have a culture designed to maximize emotional investment while keeping actual commitment as ambiguous as possible for as long as possible.
The source categorically rejects all of those methods. Ambiguity is the enemy of the blueprint. The alternative it presents is strikingly, almost aggressively direct.
It essentially says, look, skip the games, go to the family's house and knock on the front door.
It sounds radically traditional to a modern ear, perhaps even intimidating. But analyze the psychology behind knocking on that door. It immediately establishes an environment of absolute transparency. You are not sneaking around. You are not hiding behind a screen. You are presenting yourself openly to the individual and their entire support system, declaring, I am here with serious, honorable intentions.
I can hear people listening to this right now thinking, that sounds utterly terrifying. For a 20-something today, used to hiding behind an algorithm, standing on a porch under the scrutiny of a father is just, it's nightmare fuel.
Oh, it's terrifying because it requires immense vulnerability and confidence, but that discomfort is functional. It filters out anyone who is not serious.
Right.
If you are only looking for a casual distraction, you will never endure the scrutiny of the front door. This direct approach leads to what the framework calls the Nudra Sharia.
The lawful look or the legal view, the officially sanctioned premarital meeting. And this source includes a story here that is essentially a tragic comedy about how culture completely ruins this
It
mechanism.
really does.
It's so funny but sad. A guy goes to a family's house for this exact meeting. He sits down in the living room, he's served a glass of apple juice, and the father of the potential bride proceeds to talk at him for the entire visit.
Just talks his ear off.
The whole time. The father dominates the room, delivers a relentless monologue, and eventually the visit ends. The guy leaves, gets in his car, and realizes he never actually spoke to the girl. He barely even looked at her. He just drank his apple juice and endured a lecture.
It highlights a severe dysfunction where cultural ego overrides religious practicality. The father, acting out of a muddy sense of protection or dominance, completely sabotages the purpose of the meeting. The source severely criticizes this dynamic.
As it should.
Treating this meeting as a mere formality where the couple doesn't interact is a catastrophic failure to understand the gravity of what they are negotiating.
Right. What are they negotiating? They aren't buying a used car. The text uses a very specific, incredibly heavy term for marriage here. Mithaq Galith.
It translates to a solemn covenant or a heavy binding treaty. The linguistic context here is staggering. The source notes that this exact phrase, Mithaq Galith, appears in the Quran only 3 times.
3 times in the entire text. I mean, I would imagine a term like that is used for massive civilization-altering events.
It is. It is used once to describe the covenant God made with the prophets, once to describe the covenant with the children of Israel at Mount Sinai, and the 3rd time to describe the bond between a husband and wife.
Wow. That puts marriage on a cosmic scale. It elevates it from a mere social contract or a tax benefit into a divine treaty.
Exactly. It highlights the immense, almost terrifying weight of the commitment. You are agreeing to merge your life with another human being, living in the most intimate, vulnerable proximity for potentially half a century.
Right.
Therefore, the idea that you would finalize a solemn covenant after a silent, awkward meeting over apple juice is structurally absurd. The blueprint is adamant. You must converse.
Think about how we operate in other areas of life. If I'm at the store and I'm buying a pen for $2, I don't just glance at it. I pick it up.
You test it out.
I click the mechanism. I scribble on a notepad to make sure the ink doesn't skip. If I apply that level of scrutiny to a $2 piece of plastic, how can I possibly agree to a lifelong solemn covenant without a thorough, probing, highly interrogative conversation?
You cannot. The cultural norm of parents monopolizing the space must be broken. The parents are intended to be a supportive perimeter ensuring physical safety in a respectful environment, but they must step back.
Let's let them talk.
They must allow the couple to engage intellectually, to hear each other's logic, to observe their reactions to stress or disagreement, and crucially, to establish the non-negotiables.
The deal breakers. This is where the blueprint completely outshines modern dating. Because in the mud, people hide their deal breakers.
Oh, all the time.
They want to be liked. They think, well, I never want to have children, or I absolutely refuse to live in this city, but I won't bring that up until month 6 when they're already emotionally attached to me.
That is a form of emotional entrapment. It relies on the sunk cost fallacy to force a compromise that inevitably breeds lifelong resentment.
The Nadra Sharia flips that entirely.
Yeah.
It is a radically transparent day-one interview. You put all your cards face up on the table immediately.
All of them.
The source lists the highly logistical nature of this conversation. It's not about favorite colors or astrology signs. It's asking, will she drive? Does she plan to work in a mixed-gender environment? Is she intending to finish her postgraduate studies abroad?
Right.
Does the man expect her to wear the niqab? Where exactly will they live? Will they have an independent home, or does he expect her to move in with his mother?
These are the mechanical realities of daily existence. If you do not align on these structural pillars, no amount of romantic chemistry, no shared sense of humor will save the marriage from collapsing under the weight of daily friction. And the brilliance of this direct, upfront approach is the cleanliness of the exit strategy.
Because if they have this conversation and say he insists on living with his parents and she insists on an independent house, what happens?
The meeting concludes. They shake hands, they wish each other well, and they part ways.
No drama.
Zero drama. There is no devastating heartbreak because they haven't spent 8 months building a false emotional infrastructure. There is no messy, drawn-out breakup. There is no money lost on rings or venues.
That's a clean break.
It is a respectful, dignified divergence of paths based on incompatible blueprints.
Just, we want different lives. Thank you for your time. Goodbye. It's so incredibly clean. And there is an empowering detail in the text here that shatters a lot of stereotypes about traditional frameworks. Because sometimes people assume this process is entirely about a man walking in and selecting a woman based on aesthetics.
The source completely dismantles that assumption. The woman possesses the exact same absolute right to look, to listen, to interrogate, and to reject.
Yes. The text notes that while physical attraction matters, a woman is often deeply attracted to a man's logic, the architecture of his mind, and his moral character.
And she cannot possibly gauge his logic if her father is doing all the talking.
Right, or if they're just sending emojis back and forth on a screen, she must hear him construct an argument. She must see how his mind operates under direct questioning. She has the ultimate authority to listen to his answers and say, you know what, his reasoning is flawed, his lifestyle doesn't match mine. No, thank you.
It is a mutual, rigorous vetting process built on a profound respect for the gravity of the 50 years ahead.
Okay, so let's assume the interview is a resounding success. They ask the hard questions, they align on the core values, the deal breakers match up perfectly, they agree to move forward, they enter the engagement phase and begin planning the wedding.
And this is the exact moment where the societal mud threatens to swamp the boat before it even leaves the dock.
The transition from the private, logical agreement into the public, performative spectacle. And this brings us to one of the most profound socioeconomic observations in the entire text. It states, and I'm quoting here, if the lawful becomes expensive, the unlawful becomes cheap.
We really must pause and examine the mechanics of that statement. It is a devastatingly accurate summary of behavioral economics applied to human intimacy. If the lawful becomes expensive, the unlawful becomes cheap.
Let's break down those definitions first. The lawful refers to a legitimate, publicly recognized, accountable marriage. The unlawful refers to illicit relationships, secret affairs, or exploiting people outside the bounds of commitment. What the source is pointing out is a fundamental rule of supply and demand.
Yes.
When a society decides to place massive artificial financial barricades in front of marriage.
Such as demanding exorbitant dowries or the mar.
Right.
We are talking about families demanding hundreds of thousands of dollars, effectively turning a spiritual covenant into a luxury commodity.
When families demand these massive sums, they are erecting a toll booth on the road to a lawful life. They drastically shrink the pool of people who can actually afford to do things the right way. But human nature doesn't obey economic barricades.
No, it doesn't.
You can't price people out of their fundamental need for companionship, intimacy, and connection.
Exactly. If you make the honorable path financially impossible, people will inevitably bypass the toll booth. You inadvertently create a massive black market for relationships.
Wow.
You widen the circle of fleeting, unprotected, unaccountable interactions. Furthermore, when couples do manage to scrape together the exorbitant funds, they begin their shared life buried under crushing financial pressure.
Starting from zero or less than zero.
The source explicitly links this initial debt to early divorce, referencing Western university studies that confirm this phenomenon is cross-cultural. There is a direct measurable correlation between the cost of a wedding and the likelihood of a divorce.
Debt poisons the soil of the home before the first seed is even planted. So that is the financial mud. But the source also explores the psychological mud of the engagement period. It describes the time between signing the contract and the wedding night as a period where people put on a massive, exhausting show.
It becomes an exercise in curating a flawless, utterly false persona.
The text uses a brilliant historical reference here. It mentions Hatim Altai, a figure famous in Arab folklore for his extreme, almost mythological generosity.
Right.
The source says during the engagement, the guy pretends to be Hatim Altai. He shows up to every visit wearing a rented Rolex. He brings lavish, unsustainable gifts. He acts like a romantic poet, a flawless hero who never experiences fatigue or irritability.
And the woman on her side plays a similar game. She pretends her family is wildly wealthy, that she is endlessly agreeable, that she wakes up every morning looking like she just left a salon.
They are living out a social media filter in real life. It is the performance of perfection. Imagine the sheer exhaustion of maintaining that. You cannot hold your breath for 60 years.
You just can't.
The advice from the source is incredibly simple, yet it is the hardest thing for people operating in the mud to do. Be yourself.
Drop the persona immediately.
The phrase I love from the text is, let's not put spices on our reality. Don't try to artificially flavor your life to make it more palatable to someone else. Have the courage to sit down and say, look, this is the unfiltered reality. Here is my actual income, not the one I pretend to have.
Here are my flaws.
Here are my anxieties.
Yeah.
Here is my real face without the makeup. This is the raw ingredient.
Because eventually, the spices run out. The honeymoon phase ends, the performance drops, and you are left with the raw ingredients. If your partner fell in love with the spices, they will feel profoundly betrayed by the reality.
Oh, absolutely.
The engagement period should be utilized to deepen authentic understanding, not to run a theatrical production.
Which perfectly explains the ultimate theatrical production, the wedding day.
The absolute pinnacle of the team.
The pressure to impress society on this one single day is practically a shared psychosis. Why do people willingly plunge themselves into years of crippling debt for a 4-hour party?
It is entirely driven by ego, insecurity, and the desperate desire to signal social class. There is a deeply flawed belief that the lavishness of the wedding validates the worth of the couple or the status of the families involved.
Right.
But the blueprint completely dismantles this logic. It points out that this is entirely an invention of the mud. The source gives examples of highly successful merchants or deeply respected religious figures who possess immense wealth. They could easily afford the million-dollar spectacle, yet they deliberately choose to hold their weddings in a standard reception room, a simple majlis.
They serve a nice dinner, people offer their congratulations, and everyone goes home.
Because they possess the wisdom to understand that the strength of the mithaq galith, the solemn covenant, is not reinforced by a $50,000 floral arrangement or a designer dress. True security does not require a 4-hour spectacle to prove its existence.
And the source points out the ultimate punchline to the joke of the big expensive wedding. It is a bitter truth. People will talk and criticize the wedding anyway.
It is the absolute certainty of human nature.
Even if you go into $1 million of debt, hire the best catering company on earth, book a palace, and fly in a famous singer.
Some aunt or some neighbor will walk out to the valet and say, well, the chicken was a bit dry, or the lighting made everyone look pale, or her dress was too plain.
You cannot purchase the permanent approval of society.
It is impossible. So why on earth would you start your shared blueprint in financial ruin just to appease an audience that is actively looking for a reason to criticize you anyway?
It is a fool's errand. You are sacrificing the peace and stability of your 50-year future for the fleeting, highly critical applause of a 4-hour crowd. So let's look at what happens after the crowd leaves. The guests go home, the expensive party ends, the door of the house closes, and the couple is finally alone. Year 1. The source points to a terrifying statistic here. A study showing a 40% divorce rate in the first year alone. Nearly half fail immediately. Why is year 1 so incredibly volatile?
Because year 1 is when the spices finally wash off and the reality of merging two distinct lives sets in. The source identifies a core psychological mismatch that drives this massive failure rate. I think of it as the clone expectation.
The clone expectation. Let's dig into that. What is happening in their minds?
When two people move into a shared space, they unconsciously bring with them the entire operating system of their childhood home. The man expects the woman to react, to manage the house, to communicate exactly the way his family did. He essentially expects her to be a female clone of his own worldview.
Right.
And she expects him to be a male clone of hers.
Why do you load the dishwasher like that? That's wrong. Why do you fold the towels in squares instead of rolling them? That's wrong. Why are you quiet when you're angry? In my family, we yell it out.
Precisely that. They fail to recognize the profound sociological reality. They come from entirely different microcultures. They were subjected to different environmental conditioning, different trauma, different communication styles. Add to that the fundamentally different psychological hardwiring of male and female brains, and they are not clones.
Yeah.
They are two entirely distinct universes colliding in a shared kitchen.
And when those universes collide over the mundane, daily habits, which is the mud, the teen, the little things that pile up there, is going to be intense friction. If you don't have a way to process that friction, the house burns down. So how does the blueprint suggest we prevent that?
By establishing an anchor, an objective third-party reference point that sits above the ego of both individuals.
In this framework, that reference point is the Deen, the shared spiritual blueprint. The source gives a brilliantly practical example of what this looks like in action. It suggests that when a couple feels disconnected by mundane arguments, they should actively engage in a shared, higher purpose to reset their perspective. For instance, calculating their zakat, their obligatory charity, together.
That is a fascinating psychological intervention.
It really is. It says, sit down together, pull up a digital portal or an app, and calculate what you owe to charity based on your combined assets. What does that actually do? It frames their financial and spiritual duties not as individual burdens, but as a team effort.
Yes.
It shifts their dynamic. Instead of being adversaries arguing over who spent too much on groceries, they are suddenly a unified team working to execute a divine command. It zooms them completely out of the mud.
It reestablishes the solemn covenant. It reminds them that their partnership exists for a purpose vastly larger than their debate over how to fold the laundry.
But even with that higher purpose, you are still going to have bad days. You're going to snap at each other. You're going to say things you regret. And this brings us to one of the most beautiful concepts in the entire source, a survival mechanism for long-term relationships. The format button.
The daily emotional reset.
The daily emotional reset. The source illustrates this with a profound story about a sage. Let me paint the picture, because it's so powerful. There was a wise, highly respected sage sitting with his students. A foolish, angry man bursts into the room and hurls terrible, vicious insults at the sage.
Okay.
The sage remains perfectly calm, doesn't react, and eventually the angry man storms out. The next day, the angry man realizes the gravity of what he did. He feels terrible. He returns to the sage and he offers a deep apology. He says, "I am so sorry for the man I was yesterday." And the sage looks at him and says, "You don't need to apologize to me. The man you insulted yesterday is gone, and you are a different man today."
It is a masterclass in emotional release and the fluidity of human nature. If we apply this to marriage, it is the ultimate survival tool. The source argues that to sustain a 60-year relationship, you must emotionally format your relationship on a daily basis.
Like formatting a hard drive, wiping it completely clean.
When an argument is resolved, it must be permanently deleted. You cannot carry the toxic residue of yesterday's fight into today's morning coffee. You cannot build a ledger of mistakes.
Oh, the ledger. People love their ledgers. They keep a meticulous mental Excel spreadsheet of every time their partner failed.
Right. Remember what you said to me 3 years ago at my sister's wedding?
Yes. The source explicitly commands burn the ledgers. If you keep bringing up mistakes from a decade ago, you are interacting with a ghost. You are punishing the person standing in front of you today for the actions of a version of them that no longer exists. You have to grant your partner the grace of a clean slate daily.
And the source doesn't just offer this as an abstract philosophy. It provides a highly actionable, almost surgical technique for establishing this clean slate every single day. It is the 10-second rule.
If you take only one thing away from this deep dive today, it should be the 10-second rule. The source argues that the first and last 10 seconds of seeing your spouse every day are the most critical moments of the entire 24-hour cycle.
They are the threshold moments. They dictate the neurological and emotional tone for everything that follows.
Let's break down the mechanics of this. First, the departure threshold, the last 10 seconds before someone leaves the house for the day. The source's advice: send them off with a prayer, a kind word, and a smile.
Always end on a positive.
Even if you were just bickering about taking out the trash 5 minutes ago, you format the hard drive at the door. The final 10 seconds must be positive. Drive safe. God bless you. See you tonight.
Because that final interaction is the emotional aftertaste they will carry with them into the stress of the outside world. It serves as their emotional armor. And then we have the mirror image of that. The return threshold, the first 10 seconds when they walk back through the door.
This is the exact moment where so many couples unknowingly destroy their peace. The source paints a vivid picture. The husband walks in. He is physically and mentally exhausted from dealing with traffic and work. He crosses the threshold of what should be his sanctuary, and immediately, in the first 3 seconds, the wife hits him with a barrage of absolute chaos.
Right.
The washing machine is flooding the floor, the kids are failing math, the plumber never showed up, and your mother called and was passive-aggressive to me.
It is an ambush.
It is an absolute ambush. And what happens biologically? His nervous system, which was just starting to downregulate because he thought he was safe, violently spikes back into a fight-or-flight response. He begins to neurologically associate the sound of his own front door opening with an immediate assault of stress.
And then he starts sitting in his car in the driveway for 20 minutes just to delay walking inside.
Exactly. The blueprint's advice is brilliant in its simplicity. Give him a moment to breathe. The first 10 seconds should be pure peace. Welcome home. How was your day? Let me take your coat. Let the nervous system settle. The flooding washing machine will still be flooding in 10 minutes. Allow him to transition from the outside world to the inside world.
But the source is incredibly balanced here because it immediately flips the script to address the husband's responsibility in these exact threshold moments. It's not just about the wife coddling the husband.
Definitely not.
The 10-second rule goes both ways. The husband cannot just walk in, drop his bag, demand dinner, and retreat to the couch in silence. He must use his first 10 seconds to actively recognize the reality of the home he is entering. He must acknowledge the wife's exhaustion.
Especially if she's been managing the home and the children all day, which is a relentless, chaotic, sensory overload job.
He needs to validate her efforts immediately. He needs to say, I see how hard you are working to keep this house running. I know today was difficult. You are doing an incredible job, and your efforts are deeply valued. By offering that active validation in the first 10 seconds, he diffuses any resentment she might have been building up while dealing with the stress of the day alone.
It is emotional alchemy.
Yeah.
You are transforming a potential war zone into a sanctuary just by controlling those 20 total seconds of the day. It's incredibly practical. But as we move into the final phase of a relationship's lifespan, we have to acknowledge a darker reality. Even if you master the 10-second rule, even if you burn the ledgers, there are external threats.
Yes, there are.
There's malware that comes from outside the house that can tear down the wall.
The ultimate threats. And what makes them so dangerous is that they rarely look like enemies. They usually look like friends.
This is one of the most chilling, relatable parts of the source material. It describes a phenomenon I think almost everyone has witnessed in some form. It's the story of the intelligence report.
A perfect term for the weaponization of gossip.
The text tells a story. A husband notices that his wife, who is usually content, grounded, and reasonable, suddenly starts making massive, expensive, out-of-character demands. She wants a new car. She wants to go to a luxury resort in Europe. She's constantly complaining about their lifestyle and the size of their house.
It's out of nowhere.
Totally out of nowhere. The husband is totally confused. But then he realizes the timeline. She recently had a visit from a friend. And during that visit, the friend essentially delivered a highly curated intelligence report on her own life. The friend sat on the couch and relentlessly bragged about how much her husband buys her, the lavish trips they take, the designer jewelry he gifts her.
It is the insertion of toxic comparison into a peaceful ecosystem. And if we analyze the psychology beneath this behavior, it is fascinating. The friend who comes over and relentlessly broadcasts her flawless marriage and her wealthy husband there's a very high probability that she is actually deeply miserable.
Oh, absolutely. She might be on the verge of separation herself.
But because she is operating entirely in the mud, the realm of ego, societal perception, and deep insecurity, she feels compelled to project a false image of supremacy. She uses her friend as an audience to validate her own fake reality.
Wow.
She needs someone to envy her so she can feel like her life has value. But in doing so, she plants seeds of deep inadequacy and resentment in her friend's mind, effectively destroying a real functional marriage with the illusion of a fake one.
It is sabotage by proxy. And the source provides a very specific defense mechanism against this. It advises a strategy of radical discretion. It tells women, and this applies equally to men, to actively conceal their blessings. Stop talking about what your spouse buys you. Stop bragging about your perfect romantic weekends in front of your social circle.
Because you never truly know the reality of the person listening to you.
Exactly. You might be sitting across from someone whose spouse is emotionally abusive, or someone who is struggling with crushing financial anxiety, or someone who is profoundly lonely. And your casual bragging, your need to show off your perfect life, isn't just tasteless. It actively causes them pain. It causes them to go home, look at their own imperfect partner, and feel bitter.
It breeds resentment.
The source uses a beautiful phrase. Seek help in fulfilling your needs through discretion. Protect your peace by keeping it quiet.
Privacy is the greatest shield a marriage has. And this concept of privacy extends far beyond just hiding the good times. It is even more critical when handling the bad times. The source places a massive emphasis on keeping conflicts strictly in-house.
When a serious fight happens, what is the modern muddy reflex?
The reflex is immediate outward escalation. People pick up their phones, they call their parents to complain, they text the details to their group chat, they post cryptic, passive-aggressive quotes on social media. In extreme cases, they immediately threaten to call a lawyer.
They throw open the doors of the house and invite the entire world in to spectate the argument.
Which practically guarantees the argument will never truly be resolved, because once you involve parents or friends, egos are activated, the stakes are raised. It is no longer just a disagreement between a husband and wife, it becomes tribal warfare. The parents feel obligated to defend their child, resentment calcifies, and retreat becomes impossible because everyone is watching.
The source offers the blueprint alternative, the Quranic advice. If a conflict is so severe that the couple cannot resolve it themselves, the instruction is not to go to court or blast it on social media. The instruction is to bring in arbitrators privately. One wise, level-headed person from his family and one wise person from hers.
The key modifier there is wise. You do not bring in the most aggressive or emotionally reactive family member. You bring in the most diplomatic.
And they sit down and mediate it privately, maintaining the dignity of the couple. The source shares an incredible historical anecdote to underscore how seriously this privacy is taken. It involves the Prophet Muhammad.
Investigating a dispute between his own daughter, Fatima, and her husband, Ali.
The Prophet learns there's friction between them. Think about the power dynamic here. He is the leader of the community, the prophet of God, and it's his daughter. The muddy response would be to publicly shame the husband, to use his immense authority to crush him.
Of course.
Instead, he investigates quietly. He mediates between them with such profound discretion that he solves the dispute seamlessly. And the incredible part is that to this day, historical records do not even know what the actual fight was about.
The secret remained a secret forever. The dignity of the marriage was preserved.
That is the absolute gold standard of conflict resolution. You solve the problem and you bury the details so deeply that not even history knows what happened. But we have to address the final, heaviest reality of this framework, because the source does not live in a utopian fairy tale.
No, it's very pragmatic.
Sometimes, despite doing the Nadra Sharia, despite ignoring the societal mud, despite formatting the hard drive daily, and despite keeping things private, the marriage breaks. Irreconcilable differences occur. Divorce happens.
It is a painful reality of human existence. The blueprint acknowledges that sometimes the structure simply cannot be saved. But what is vital here is the source's categorization of the end. It argues that there is a successful divorce and a failed divorce.
A successful divorce? That sounds like a complete oxymoron to a lot of people. How can the destruction of a covenant be successful?
The success lies in the execution. The source summarizes the required mindset with a profoundly compassionate quote. Do not forget the grace between you.
Do not forget the grace between you, even at the bitter end.
Especially at the bitter end. A successful divorce is one where both adults possess the emotional maturity to recognize that while the romantic contract has ended, the human obligation to respect and decency remains. And the most critical instruction here is regarding the children. If you must divorce your spouse, the source begs, do not divorce your children.
Meaning, do not sever their world in half. Do not turn them into collateral damage or weapons.
The children should never be exposed to the dark, gritty details of the breakup. The failures of the husband as a romantic partner do not need to destroy his image as a father in the eyes of his kids. The failures of the wife do not need to taint her image as a mother. A successful divorce absorbs the pain so the children can keep the beautiful, untarnished image of both their parents intact.
Because if you don't do that, if you give in to the mud and seek vengeance, you are playing directly into the hands of the ultimate enemy. And the source is very clear about who the real enemy is in these situations. It's not the ex-wife. It's not the ex-husband.
The source uses the story of Joseph and his brothers to illustrate the true adversary. The devil's primary overarching goal is to sow discord, to sever ties, to split families apart and create echoing, generational trauma.
When you let a divorce turn into a scorched earth campaign, when you try to destroy your ex's reputation in the community, when you use the legal system to inflict maximum pain, you aren't winning. You are just doing the devil's work for him. You are turning a personal incompatibility into a generational war between two tribes that will damage your children and your grandchildren.
You are creating trauma that will outlive you. A successful divorce is the ultimate triumph of the Deen over the teen. It is choosing the disciplined, honorable path of grace, even when every single societal instinct tells you to throw mud.
Man, that is heavy, but it is so deeply necessary. It really brings the entire framework into focus.
Yeah.
We have covered an incredible amount of ground today, tracking a relationship from the teenage brain all the way to the end of a lifelong bond.
The contrast between the mud and the blueprint provides a remarkable lens for viewing our own behavior.
Let's do a quick wrap-up to solidify this for you, the listener. The mud, the teen, is the noise. It is the pressure to marry before you're actually mature. It is the secretive gamified dating culture. It is the crushing financial pressure of a performative wedding. It is the fake personas, the keeping up with the Joneses, the public airing of private grievances, and the bitter, vindictive divorces.
And the blueprint is the antidote to all of that. It is building your foundation first. It is the radical honesty and terrifying transparency of the upfront interview. It is living within your means and ignoring society's expectations. It is the daily forgiveness of the format button. It is mutual respect, radical privacy, and, if necessary, parting ways with undeniable grace.
It is such a clarifying way to navigate the world. But as we wrap up this deep dive, I want to leave you with a final provocative thought to chew on. We spend this entire time talking about marriage, but I want you to think about that core concept of the Nadra Sharia, that brutally honest, ego-free, upfront interview where you lay all your deal breakers on the table and either agree or walk away cleanly. What if we took that concept out of the romantic context? What if we apply that exact level of transparent, ego-free communication to our business partnerships, or to our deep friendships, or even more radically, to our relationship with ourselves? How much of the mud in our daily lives, how much anxiety and wasted time could you completely avoid if you just stopped pretending, stopped putting spices on your reality, and started being entirely honest from day one? Throw away the mud. Use the blueprint. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. Take care of yourselves, and we'll catch you next time.